Hello everybody, my name is this green and black thing that is sitting over my CZ P-09 handgun that I've had for a while. This thing is called an MCK. It stands for Micro Conversion Kits, and it is made by the company CAA USA. CAA as in Charlie Alpha Alpha, and USA of course stands for United States of America. The reason why I'm doing another accessory review, as a lot of you guys know, is because my budget isn't quite back up to what it used to be. Hopefully I'll be able to do regular firearms reviews in the not too distant future, but in the meantime this is what my budget allows for. Not too long ago I had some medical issues which resulted in medical bills, and fortunately that has all been resolved through various means. During that ordeal I sold a large part of my gun collection. I was kind of sad about that, but it helps pay bills, and you got to do what you got to do to pay bills. Also, St. Luke's canceled the major portion of the debt, the emergency room visits. So that was very nice of them, and I'm very appreciative of that. And then the community of the saints, the believers that I know online, including a lot of you guys who watch this channel, actually contributed to various funds for me, even sent in checks by mail and those kinds of things that made up all of the difference. So one way or another, all the medical bills wound up getting handled. Now there's some ongoing things that are going on in terms of, ongoing prescriptions that need to be filled, and semi-regular doctor visits that need to be had just to make sure that everything's working right and those kinds of things. But fortunately enough donations came in that I was actually able to get some of my other debts taken care of, and basically open up a spot in my budget to make room for regular doctor visits and prescriptions and things like that. So thank you very much to all of you out there. Thank you very much especially to my Christian friends who were willing to help out a fellow Christian in that way. And glory be to God, I am doing much better than I used to be. I still have, days that are worse, and also days that are better and that kind of thing, but I'm at the point where I am working now and I'm bringing in my own income, and this is one of the things that I was actually able to buy using my own own money again. And having my own money coming in is a wonderful feeling. I think that it's very special to me to be able to go back out there and work. It's a good feeling to be able to do things yourself and earn things yourself. And you guys who contributed to my medical needs helped get me here, so thank you very much for that, and I'm greatly humbled by all the support that there was. It was actually pretty massive, all things considered, and like I said, I'm giving glory to God for all of it. But back into the review, because that's what you guys are really here for. You saw the title, you're interested in this thing, you want to see what my thoughts on it are. And fortunately for you guys, this is actually going to be a multi-part series because it's not just my MCK that I'm going to be evaluating. There's a couple other people that I know that also received MCKs, and so I'm going to be giving you guys updates on what's going on with their MCKs as well. So there is mine that is being used with a CZ P-09, and it's the model that has the suppressor height night sights and a threaded barrel. We also have one that is housing a Taurus G3C, and we have another MCK that is housing a Sig Sauer P365. So this first video, it's basically just going to be an initial impression video. We all got a chance to install our firearms into our MCKs, and we've all had a chance to shoot them. We haven't really worked out some of the finer details regarding accuracy on these things, so accuracy evaluations will come a little bit later. I'll let you know right now that there are accuracy issues with some of the MCKs. My personal one here, this one with the P-09, seems to do pretty well. It's not as good as a standard PCC, I'll let you guys know that, but it's functional. That is, I can hit, a 50% IPSC target at 25 yards pretty easily, pretty consistently, and realistically, with a gun like this, that's all that I would really expect out of it. So I'm not overly worried about it. It's not something that I would consider to be on par with true from the ground up PCCs, but it is certainly enough to be viable. The G3C model we're having issues with because the fellow who owns that one wanted to do open sights on his, and so he got the open sights that come from CAA USA. And when we took it out to shoot it, we forgot to bring along a tool to adjust the front sights, and so it was way off. He was able to figure out how far it was off by, and once he figured out how far it was off by, he was able to get consistent hits on a 12-inch plate at 25 yards, so it didn't seem like it was bad at all, but we're kind of cautious on that one until we actually get it zeroed in. And then the SIG 365 one, the initial accuracy that we're dealing with right now is pretty terrible. We couldn't keep it consistently on steel at 25 yards. And that has us a little bit worried and concerned, and so we're going to need to kind of come back to that one and see what's going on there. As far as we can tell right now, it has to deal with the lockup system. The MCKs to lock your gun in place, there's basically two locking points that it uses. One of them is at the front. There's these little tabs here at the front, and on a lot of the MCKs that are made for the bigger handguns, it has a tab that actually fits into the rail on the bottom of the handgun. A lot of handguns, especially a lot of larger handguns, have some rail underneath the barrel for things like lights and lasers and those kinds of attachments. And the MCK takes advantage of that rail by having a little tab that fits into that rail, and that's what locks up the front end of the handgun. And then on the back end of the handgun, there's a little loading gate that actually slides into the handgun, and it keeps the back end of the handgun from moving. Well, on the smaller handguns, you don't always have that same kind of a rail system. Be it more or less a 1913 rail or a Glock style rail, which is not 1913, it's a little bit different, but same basic concept. The smaller handguns don't always have rail, and so it has some kind of a different system going on that one. Instead of a little tab that pushes up into place, it has some kind of a system that seems to kind of grab it from the side. I'm not exactly sure because it's not mine. It belongs to somebody else, so I'm not able to go through and geek out on all the little details and figure out exactly what's going on there. But however it's locking up in the front, it doesn't seem to be very secure. It has the loading gate in the back that seems to be on all of the MCKs, but that one, the front locking mechanism, doesn't seem to be overly secure. And so our next thing that we're going to be doing with that one is trying to find some way to shim it so that it's more secure, so that it's more tight. So that will be coming in future episodes. So right now, like I said, we're not going to focus on the accuracy too much until we evaluate different ways of dealing with accuracy issues. One of the guns we forgot to bring a tool to adjust the front sight with, and so we can't really do a lot with that. So we're going to come back around to accuracy. There are some initial things that would give us pause about the accuracy, especially with the P365 MCK. But this one, for the CZ P-09, that seems to indicate that these actually can be reasonably accurate. Like I said, 50% IPSC target at 25 yards is not great accuracy, but it's very functional. If you think of this thing as a plinking type gun that you would use at a normal handgun range, most of those are set up with 25 yards and in. So if you're thinking of it as a plinking gun, at least some of the MCK models seem to be more than capable of that kind of a role. There are some people who would think of these as, serious type use guns, self-defense guns and whatnot. And in terms of the functional range, one like this at least, with a front locking tab that actually fits into a rail on the front of the handgun, seems to have enough accuracy for a CQB type environment. But like I said, when you get to some of the smaller handguns that don't necessarily have something that's reminiscent of a 1913 rail or a Glock rail or something like that, then the accuracy seems to suffer quite a bit. So if you're wanting one of these for serious use, keep that in mind. And I'll tell you right off the bat that I don't consider this to be really a serious use type accessory. This is more for fun on the range in my estimation and in my purpose of use. I got this because it allowed me to take a handgun that was pretty good but not getting a whole lot of use because I've switched over to striker fired guns for my EDC guns, but I still had this one in the inventory. It's a hammer fired gun, double action, single action, and it wasn't getting a whole lot of use. It wasn't getting a lot of range time, and a lot of times when I go out to the range and I shoot with other people, a lot of them don't really like shooting the handguns all that much, just because handguns are kind of difficult. And there's a number of people that I shoot with that don't really shoot all that often, and if you're not practicing with handguns fairly often, they are kind of unwieldy. The average person, I'm not saying the avid shooter, but the average person usually cannot shoot a handgun very well past 15 yards. Doesn't matter if they're older, younger, good arm strength, low arm strength. The average person, I'm not saying they're the average avid shooter, but just the average person just is going to have a very difficult time getting past 15 yards with a handgun. It takes practice. It takes a certain amount of skill. It takes a certain amount of training. And those kinds of, with training and time and, you know, just doing the work, you can get to where you're pretty good with a lot of different handguns. But like I said, it's work. And if I'm going out and I'm shooting with people, especially people who are new to firearms or new-ish to firearms, they don't shoot firearms very often, I want to be a good firearms ambassador and make the experience relatively pleasant for them. And so making them shoot a handgun that can sometimes be a little bit snappy, not that 9mm is ultra powerful, but for people that don't shoot very often, 9mm can be kind of a snappy thing. And so instead of just putting the plain handgun in their hand, giving them something bigger with more points of stabilization, more points of contact, makes sense. And that's what I got this gun for, is a way to make handguns fun. And in that sense, it seems to be doing fairly well. Like I said, out of the 3 that we're going to be testing, this one seems to be doing the best so far in terms of accuracy. In terms of reliability, having malfunctions with these, none of them have seemed to have a major malfunction so far. So that is also a good thing. That is, they basically operate as good as the handgun does, and so far what we're seeing, especially if you avoid attaching things around this huge ejection port here, don't try to attach anything around there. So you'll see on mine I have my red dot set forward. One person is using open sights on there, so they have, standard rear sight, standard front sight, well away from the ejection port. If you keep all of your attachments well away from that ejection port, it doesn't seem that there's any major problem with ejection, provided that the handgun had pretty good ejection to begin with. If you have a handgun that has fairly weak ejection, or the ejection pattern isn't strongly to the right but maybe kind of over the top, then that potentially could cause some issues. But like I said, for the most part, as long as your handgun starts out with a fairly strong right hand ejection, it seems to do just fine in the MCKs, at least in our sample. Like I said, our sample is fairly small, it's just 3 guns, but so far no malfunctions. And like I said, we have taken steps to make sure that we keep our ejection ports relatively clear, and that is worth noting. And we also started out with handguns that all had fairly strong right hand ejection to begin with. So in terms of accuracy, like I said, we're going to have to work that out a little bit more, but this one proves that good accuracy can be achieved with at least some of the models. In terms of reliability, none of them have reliability issues, so that is good. In terms of ease of use and ergonomics, ergonomics are fairly decent. The front end of the firearms accessory, I should say, because that's what this is. The front end of the firearms accessory is kind of a different feel. It's kind of sort of CAA USA's take on a angled foregrip, and it is definitely weird. Let's go ahead and get it from the other side here. It's kind of a weird deal. Your hand goes along the bottom, and then there's this thumb rest off on the side, and it is kind of a strange feeling. But I pull this thumb rest a little bit further back than is what is comfortable, and it kind of creates some tension in the hand just kind of automatically to get your thumb up there. And so the front of the gun as a whole is actually held pretty securely because of that. So it's strange, but it works. And then the pistol grip, which of course is the pistol grip of the pistol, the actual handgun itself, that is basically the same as, you know, whatever your handgun is, with one major exception, and that is that the way that this thing grips the pistols forces you to put your hand just a little bit lower than normal. So for me, it's a little bit uncomfortable because I have to move not a ton, but maybe a quarter of an inch lower than I normally would hold the gun. This is, like I said, is a CZ-P-09 that's in this thing. And the CZ-P-09 is nice because it has a relatively low bore axis. It also has a fairly generous beaver tail on the back that really allows me to get a high grip most of the time. But when it's in this chassis, I can't get quite as high as I'm used to, and so that throws me off a little bit. As to controls, they do have a cutout so that you can still access your controls. But again, I have a little bit of an issue there. The material is somewhat thick, which is nice and sturdy. I like that part about it. But it's thick, and it kind of gets in the way of accessing these controls just a little bit. And I usually have to break my grip in order to activate them like I normally would. So ergonomically, it's a little bit worse on the pistol side in terms of what you would be used to doing with the handgun. And then the front is different, but that's actually pretty workable. I don't find that greatly uncomfortable or anything like that at all. As you can see, it does have built into this angled foregrip thing, it has a spare magazine holder, and by the way, this gun was checked and cleared off camera, but it's just a place to store an extra magazine, which is kind of cool. I don't know that it's necessarily here and there or there for the recreational purpose of use. Like I said, I would definitely caution people on using these guns for serious use. Definitely get yours, test yours first, put it through its paces. Maybe even go to a self-defense class of some kind with this thing, provided the instructor will allow it, and put it through some drills, put it through some paces, and see if it actually is going to do what you should expect it to do. And having to go through several hundred rounds in the matter of a few hours can really show where a system is strong and weak. So I'm not saying that self-defense situations, serious use applications are completely out of the question. I'm just saying that based on what we're seeing with R3 that we're testing, some combinations of MCK plus pistol turn out better than others, and you should really evaluate it before you go into that kind of scenario. Don't trust it as an out of the box to save your life type thing. But in terms of ergonomics, like I said, the front end is weird, but it's actually pretty good. The back end, the grip itself, like I said, is going to force your hand a little bit lower than you might be used to, and you are still able to access the controls, but because the edges are so thick, sometimes it doesn't work quite right, and you're going to have to break your grip to get to things. The charging handle just attaches to the slide. You guys have probably seen that in other videos on the MCK. Just normal operation that way, but it is on the back end of the gun, and that is, to me, a little bit awkward. Whenever I run PCCs, I'm always thinking of a charging handle that's at the front end, and that's just what feels natural to me because that's how most other PCCs are made. This rear kind of charging handle thing is a lot more similar of, like, say, an AR-9 or something like that kind of charges from the rear, and personally I don't like ARs, period, and I especially do not like ARs that have an unmodified charging handle. You guys know that on my major AR that I use, which is the KS-47 from PSA, which I don't like a whole lot because it's one of the early generations that still had problems with the extractors breaking and things like that, which fortunately they seem to have fixed in later generations, so good on that one. But yeah, on that one I have a side charging system that I set up on it just because of how much I hate rear charging handles, because a rear charging handle just invites you to take the gun away from yourself, away from whatever shooting position that you're used to using, and takes the gun off targets, and it delays it that much more and things like that, and it's just, I don't like it. It's not a very natural system. But is it bad? No. And I will say that these charging handles are a little on the small side, and so they're a little bit hard to grab and activate quickly just because they are fairly nubby, very, very small, and so that part is not so great. But like I said, that's more, in a lot of ways, more of a training issue and an issue of expectations. If you're wanting this gun to be, you know, the fastest ever running gun, and you want to take it into, you know, serious competitions and whatnot, probably not the best gun for that, to be honest. At least not in this form. But like I said, these with training are usable. Like I said, it does take time getting used to, though, if you're used to most of the standard PCCs that charge from the front. Going to the rear is going to be weird. And like I said, they are a little on the small side, so you'll have to get used to that, or find some kind of an alternative way to work around that. Alright, so like I said, accuracy we're still evaluating. Reliability seems to be just fine so far. We haven't put hundreds or thousands of rounds through them yet because, well, who has money to do hundreds or thousands of rounds through any of their guns these days? You know, if somebody wants to donate a couple of, well, you know, at least 3,000 rounds so we can put 1,000 rounds through each gun, that would be totally awesome, but I don't expect that to happen anytime soon, so we'll probably have to settle for a few hundred on each gun. It's just kind of the way that it is right now. But we're still evaluating reliability, but so far it looks fine as long as you keep the ejection port open and you started with a handgun that had good rightward ejection. So good on that. And I'm saying rightward as opposed to some of the guns that kind of eject up. They're supposed to be rightward ejecting, but technically it's more upward than it is to the right. So yeah, reliability is decent. Accuracy, we're definitely going to have to come back and visit, because like I said, the G3C model of the MCK we're not having good luck with. Ergonomics on the front ends are weird but good. On the back end, not quite as awesome, just because the chassis kind of gets in the way of the controls and also gets in the way of a normal grip. So yeah, there's those kinds of issues, but on the whole, our conclusion so far is that, you know, at the very least, they're good, fun range guns. And in that kind of purpose of use, I think that even at this point, although we're still fairly early in the testing, that we would be confident in saying that anyone who's looking for a recreational device, you know, to increase the fun factor of their handgun, that the MCK is pretty good at doing that. In terms of costs, you can get lots of different prices on these things depending on where you go. What is one thing that's actually kind of nice about CAA USA as far as the company is concerned is that they actually treat their dealers pretty well. And they are very much so committed to never underselling their dealers. And you can actually go to their website, scroll down to the bottom of the web page, and down at the bottom of the web page, there'll be like something like a dealers area or something like that that you can click on. It'll talk about dealers, and you can click on that, and it'll bring up a map of where all of their dealers are. And unfortunately, when you go to Idaho, at least when I looked at it at the time of this video, well, actually at the time that I bought mine, they did not have any dealers in Idaho, which sucks. So if anybody out there in Idaho wants to become a dealer for CAA USA, right now in Idaho you don't have any competition, just throwing that out there. So I couldn't find any dealers that were local to me, so I wound up ordering mine from CAA USA directly. And they were actually running a sale at the time that allowed me to get mine for basically $200. As I recall, they did not charge for shipping, and they did not charge for tax. That was built into the price that they showed me. And that also included this interesting paint job. The ones that they were running on the sales are the ones that had the fancy paint jobs, and so I didn't really care personally too much about what the paint job would be. They had one that said black multicam, and I was like, oh, black's a good standard color for, you know, a gun or a gun accessory, so I'll just go with that. And this is how it turned out. And like I said, I don't think it looks bad or anything. I personally don't really care what the color is. That's just kind of what I wound up picking, just because that's the one that they had the sale on, and so that's what I went with. So for me, I found them as low as $200 with a sale. There were some of the models that I saw on the website that were $400 for the MCK itself, and then they also sell accessories that would add to the price from there. Some of the accessories seem pretty practical. For example, they had open sights, which the other fellow who is helping me evaluate these things, he got open sights on his, and those weren't overly expensive. I'll let you go to the website and check that out, or visit your local dealer and check that out. And open sights are, just fine to have those. That's, as an accessory, makes sense. And then they also have this little slot here. This is just a little placeholder here, but a little slot that can hold their version of either a flashlight or a laser or something like that. They have flashlights and lasers that fit in the slot that this thing came out of. But this little thing right here is just a little placeholder. So they have, flashlights and lasers. Those make sense as accessories. They do sell their own red dots. They don't seem to be super high quality red dots, and I'm not saying that they're, going to break as soon as you get them or something like that, but just not as refined as a lot of the other red dot designs that are out there. So if you're looking for something that's probably going to be a little bit more precise and maybe a little bit more battle worthy, probably want to get your own red dot. But like I said, if you want something that's quick and easy that you can buy as a bundle, they do have red dots of their own that you can get. These thumb rests are something that I actually would recommend, because it does make the gun considerably more comfortable to handle. And these are $15 for the pair, which is overdone, but like I said, it really does help with the ergonomics of the system as a whole. So that is something that I would recommend getting. They also have some accessories that frankly are nothing short of gimmicks. For example, in that accessory slot, in addition to having lights and lasers, which I personally really wouldn't recommend that much because they're not very powerful lights or lasers from what I see. They're kind of the normal chintzy ones that are sold with a lot of handguns to unsuspecting buyers kind of thing. I personally wouldn't recommend them anyways, and I consider them to be kind of gimmicky. Getting a true weapon light that you can just mount to one of the pick rails on the side, and underneath this thumb tab there is a little 1913 rail that you could directly attach a light to, and that's what I would recommend. But in addition to kind of the cheap lights and lasers that they sell, they also have, of all things, a bayonet that fits in that slot. This is not exactly the kind of gun that would really be practical to have a bayonet with in the first place, but hey, if you want to have a bayonet, you can get a bayonet for your MCK. Some of the products that they have are definitely kind of gimmicky, but if you're looking for something, like I said, that's more in the recreational realm, something that's cool and interesting and that kind of thing, you can do weird, crazy things if you want to, and it'd be just fine. So, if you want to have the bayonet, get the bayonet. They also sell compression sleeves that make shooters better. When you wear the compression sleeve, your accuracy goes up. Yeah. Not quite snake oil, but pretty close to it. So yeah, I'm not overly happy about all the things that CAA USA sells. Like I said, some of them are pretty clearly gimmicky. But like I said, the MCKs themselves, for the most part, seem to do what they're supposed to do in terms of making the handgun easier and more enjoyable to shoot. So there is that. Let's see, other things that are appropriate in initial impressions video. One thing that does really merit some attention is the stabilizing brace that they have on these. This is the Gen 2 stabilizing brace, and it hooks onto the side of the brace, not the side of the brace, but the side of the chassis. There's a little hook here, and it's not the most rigid, but it works, and you can actually still fire the gun with the brace closed, which is nice, and it's relatively easy to take off and snap into place, and it's actually pretty rigid. There's not a lot of slop in it at all. There's like virtually no slop at all. My SB braces that I have on my CZ Scorpion and now I'm calling it my Starpion, but it's a Streebog that's been modified. But the SB braces that I have on those have a lot more play in it than this ever does. This You know, if you had something that could measure less than 1/32 of an inch, it might be able to pick up the difference, but like I said, it is extremely slight. If you can stand the kind of the standard braces that are put on the CZ Scorpions and the Streebogs, then this thing is, you know, better than those in terms of how good the lockup is. And that is something that they really did a good job with. And so I'm very happy about that. That pretty much covers all the basic function. Oh, one more thing that does need to be mentioned. These things are usually made to accommodate multiple models from a given manufacturer. So this CZ model, they have two CZ models. One is for the P10 series, so the P10C, the P10S, the P10F. And they also have one for the 07 and the 09. As far as CZ goes, and they also have a bunch of models for Glocks. They have a bunch of models for Smith & Wessons, or at least one model for Smith & Wessons. I can't remember how many they had. Before I say a bunch, I should qualify it. But they do make these things for a variety of different manufacturers. So CZ's in there, Springfield's in there, Smith & Wesson is in there, Glock is of course in there, Taurus is in there. Trying to remember. Pretty sure there are others, I just can't remember what they are right now. But there's quite a few manufacturers that they make, and of course quite a few models. And like I said, these chassis are usually made to accommodate more than one model. So this one right now is set up for my P-09, but there's a configuration, and they have an instruction book that tells you how to configure each one. But there's also a configuration that works for the P-07 as well. And some of the MCKs that they have are interesting because not only do they accommodate different sizes of guns, but they also accommodate some of the different configurations of them. For example, this P-09 is the suppressor-ready version of the P-09. So it has suppressor height sights, and it came with a threaded barrel. And so to accommodate the suppressor height sights, you can see this charging handle, that's what this block back here is. This charging handle is actually raised a little bit so that it can get over the suppressor height sights. So that is an interesting adjustment that CAA USA made that I would say is good, because CZ sold a ton of these in the suppressor ready version. And then because it has that threaded barrel on the front, CAA USA in their instruction manual is pretty clear about the fact that they do not want these things running as they normally do with a threaded barrel in the gun. It kind of messes up some of the interior dimensions and things that go on. So the way to get around it and still use a threaded barrel with it is to do what I've done. What I've done is I've taken a linear compensator, screwed it onto the threaded barrel, and now that pushes all of the major blast of the gun out forward of the MCK, and nothing's happening in there. Normally, if you don't have a threaded barrel on there, they have a little shroud that fits in the slot, and you can actually see the gap where the shroud used to sit, but they have a shroud that sits in there, and that shroud kind of acts like this linear compensator does. It takes most of the force of the blast and directs it forward. And so basically, if you have a threaded barrel, you need to have a linear compensator on it. If you do not have a threaded barrel, you need to have their little shroud on it to make sure that that blast is directed in a safe direction and not off into your hand. That is also another failing of the P365 model that is worth mentioning. For whatever reason, and we're not entirely sure why, but the first time that we shot it, as far as we know, we did everything that the instructions said to about correctly sizing everything. And for some reason, the blast force inside of the MCK was actually strong enough that it popped out this little placeholder here, and it actually broke the little plastic tabs that normally hold it in place. And so on that version, we no longer have the little placeholder there. Like I said, we weren't using it. We didn't plan on using it. That person just leaves the 1913 rail on the side open and attaches a light that way. We don't use the CAA lights on any of our MCKs, so it's not a major loss to us, but that just demonstrates that the blast force, if things are not right, can cause some weird things to happen, and it can be maybe a touch on the dangerous side, so just be aware of that. Okay, so that covers pretty much everything that I wanted to cover in this initial impressions video. Overall, I'd say we're looking pretty decent. It's, from what we see so far, it doesn't look like any of these are as accurate as true PCCs are, but they're accurate enough to be used at most handgun ranges, which is kind of what the idea behind them is something that turns a handgun into something that's easier and more fun for most people that would normally struggle with handguns. As to duty use, like I said, we definitely see some variety in the performance of the different MCKs for different models of guns, and so we would definitely suggest testing them thoroughly before making the decision to make them as a duty use type of thing. Also, on that note, it is worth pointing out that the MCK in and of itself does not have any safety, and it doesn't always work with handgun models that have safeties. In the material online, as you're going through the material reading up on the different models for the different handguns, it will sometimes say this one does not work with this the version of the handgun that has an external safety. I'll just flat out say it doesn't work with that. Some of them, the external safety is okay. In mine, the P-09 is such that it can be arranged to have either a decocker or a safety. Mine is the decocker model, and since the decocker goes down, it's perfectly fine. It's when things go up that it starts interfering with the chassis, and because of that, it can create an issue. So sometimes it works with handguns that have safeties, sometimes it doesn't, and it doesn't have any safety of its own. And so in terms of a duty use type gun, generally when you have a larger format gun that doesn't have a holster, you generally want to have some kind of external safety, and this doesn't, so consider that. Just keep that in mind and be forewarned. So yeah, that's all that I got on that one. Again, thank you everyone who helped with my medical expenses. I greatly appreciate it. I am back to work, and now that I am back to work, I actually have money of my own now. Not a ton yet, because I haven't been back to work for very long, but I was able to afford this accessory, and I'm going to be evaluating it for you guys. Stay tuned for further results. As we go forward, we're definitely going to be looking at sustained reliability, because we want to put a lot more rounds through them than we have so far, and we also definitely want to come back to that issue of accuracy, because like I said, the model for the P365 definitely was lackluster. That one definitely really needs to be looked at again. So that's what we'll be doing in the future. Thank you very much for your time and attention. If you are in Christ, go with God and be blessed. And like I said, I very much so thank all my Christian brothers and sisters out there who helped me with my medical expenses. And for those of you who are not in Christ, I pray that you would come to know Him, to know the true Christ of history, the genuine Savior of mankind, the only genuine Savior of mankind. Amen.